The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Howdy, hello, everybody. Coming to you cordless from the Minneapolis. That's what the locals like to call it around here. And that's because they have a permanent inferiority complex. What the hell? Okay, it's Thursday night, June 19th, 2025. I am Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters Night. This is episode number 241. If you're keeping score at home, I hope you are. We got a two-fer for you tonight. We got two guests. Jennifer Oliver Connell is coming on live in just a couple minutes. And after her, we have Jonathan Lockwood, who taped this afternoon, and where he's a military historian and former U.S. Army colonel, and he's coming on to talk about the stuff going on in Iraq and between Iraq and Israel. So he knows his stuff, so that's good. And Jennifer knows her stuff too. So you're wondering what I'm doing in Minneapolis? I'll tell you, it's hot. And, you know, I bitch and moan about the weather here. Like the weather, I'll tell you this just straight out. The weather here, 4 months of the year, is fucking terrible. There's just no getting around it. 8 months of the year is pretty nice. And today's one of those other days. And this weekend, we're going to set some records, I guess. It's going to be in the mid to upper 90s. And that heat index thing, you know, I don't know if you have the heat index where you live. I have no idea. It's kind of the opposite of the wind chill. Yeah, the wind chill as well. You know, it's really actually feels colder than this. The heat index, it feels hotter than this. Well, that's going to be easily in the hundreds this weekend. So, and I have a window cracked here in the studio because it's so warm. And I don't think we're going to have any trouble with the sound because we're pretty close mic'd here. So that's not usually, but if we get a siren or something like that, you might hear it. And guess what? I don't give a fuck. That's your problem, not mine. All right. So I'll tell you what else I don't really give an F about. Well, I do care about this. What am I talking about? I care about this a lot, and this is going really well. We're booking guests like left and right. We're almost entirely booked up now for July. So that's good. So if you want to be a guest on the show, get your request in. That's all I can tell you. This coming week, we have on Monday, Michael McNamara. He's written a book. He's also a former U.S. I think it's Marine. He was in the Iraqi conflict. He's written a book called From Trauma to Joy, and how to deal with, for people dealing with stuff after they come back from combat. And God knows, I mean, it's really terrible because these people come back. We train them literally to kill people, which is completely antithetical to being a human. You're trained to do that. Then you go off and you do that. And then you come home and, oh, okay, let's get back to normal. And how do you get back to normal after that? And it's a terrible thing. And I'm glad that I just saw on the news the other day that our government is finally starting to address this, about the fact that, you know, you come back from combat and you're probably pretty much fucked up. There's probably no way to get around that. And so I'm glad that they're now putting together permanent policies in place for people, not only just dealing with PTSD, but people just coming back from combat generally. And I'm glad to see that. He's on Monday. Tuesday, Salvador Litvak, or Sal, as they call him. He's a Jewish humorist and comedian. And so you're thinking, well, why haven't the Israelis are fighting the Iranians, and why are you have a Jewish comedian on? Because when your country's getting bombed, that might be the only way you can deal with it, is humor. So I'm really looking forward to talking to him. That's going to be kind of fascinating. He's been around a long time. That's Tuesday. Wednesday, our old friend Larry Newman will be here, bail bondsman extraordinaire and Bigfoot investigator. And there's so much Bigfoot stuff going on. there's so much of everything going on, and that's because everyone on the planet has a camera and videotape machine in their pocket. And it's like we're kind of capturing stuff and on top of that, and I'll address this in the C block too. And we're not taking calls tonight, folks. I will do a little talk about UFO stuff after Mr. Lockwood's done. But at this point now, basically any visual thing you can think of can be faked by computer, and extremely well. And so I don't know if you need to believe all this stuff, but it's really kind of funny as the real evidence rises, the fake evidence rises too. So he's joining us on Wednesday, Larry Newman. On Thursday, I've been talking about this because I'm really looking forward to having this guy on. L.A. Marzulli is joining us, and he has had an entire career, a lifetime of paranormal research. I don't know how many books this guy's written. I'm guessing a couple dozen, and also he's done several film documentaries, and you can watch them all on Amazon Prime. He's dealt with every sort of paranormal phenomena you can think of, not just UFOs, everything, apparitions, the whole bit. He deals with it, and we're going to talk to him. So that should be kind of interesting too. Not kinda, it will be, because I'll make it interesting. That's what I do, right? You got that? You got that? All right, we're going to put Jennifer on here. So hold on tight. Hold on to your little keisters. Jennifer's on her spare laptop.
Yep, that's the one.
Sorry about that. We've been having more and more problems. People connecting and stuff. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's the internet. I don't know if it's us or it's summer. I have no freaking idea. You have any idea?
Have you had any updates to this software that you use? Because I got no problem on the other ones.
This software is all browser based, so we don't. It phones in. So
but I use a browser based one too called StreamYard, and
yeah, right. That's basically
have no problems with that. Have no problem with Zoom. I just think the Streamlabs seems to not like my camera now. Yeah. And it also doesn't like my microphone. So
I'm sorry about that. I don't know what to tell you. All these systems are pretty much the same. So matter of fact, I think the core software on all of them is identical. That's what I think, but
probably.
All right, it's Juneteenth today. And before I even ask you about that, I want to you wrote a fabulous column yesterday called, because I love the title of this, called It's 1865. Hold on. Just say it. Let me read it. I gotta roll it. It's 1862 all over again. Anna Navarro waxes ineloquent about illegal labor and the price of milk. All right, first of all, how does this woman get around to having a job? I mean, I don't
frankly, I wish I knew what she got or who she slept with or whatever, because seriously, she hasn't been any type of political consultant, kind of like the Lincoln Project boys.
Yeah, right.
Hasn't been a political consultant for decades.
Right, and she's also, they bill her as a conservative, and I don't know if it was you, somebody else who pointed this out. Like, she isn't a single conservative thing forever. I mean, it's like she
never did. Jeb Bush wasn't necessarily a conservative, and neither was John McCain, even though he claimed he was. It's like neither one of them were conservatives; they were Republicans.
Right. Maybe that's the difference. I don't know. Maybe she claims you're a Republican but not a conservative. But I loved your analogy here, because you compared what she's talking about to basically slave ownership in the 1800s. Yeah. Because you're absolutely right. That's basically what it is. So go ahead, explain it instead of me talking.
Basically, Anna Navarro was, as I said, waxing eloquent about, how horrible it is to work at a dairy farm. First of all, she's probably never stepped her toe out of Manhattan, let alone
and also
actually seen a dairy farm.
Let me interject here. It really bothers me that these elites assume nobody likes this work.
Right. That nobody likes this work, or that the degree of the work has anything to do with oh, the Americans won't do it. No, if you paid Americans well enough, or if, as I said in an example in the article, there's an entire college, the College of the Ozarks in Missouri, that has an entire work study program built around animal husbandry, built around dairy farming. And that's how these students pay for their tuition. And a lot of them love it.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't tell me that there aren't Americans who want to do this. Stop making it difficult with regulations.
This is my complaint about, in some ways, about this whole thing, debate or talk about AI, because the thing is, there's the assumption that, well, and even I've made this not assumption or prediction that it's going to replace a lot of people's jobs. But if you're literally literally picking cotton for a living, AI is not going to replace your job. AI can't pick any cotton, or can't milk any cows, or can't do any of that crap.
No.
And so maybe these, well, this has already happened in America, that the trade jobs, the pay for trade jobs has gone up substantially, just because, so why did I bring that up? Can you tell me? No.
Well, I mean, Gen Z is definitely eschewing of the whole college thing and the educated, class, supposedly, because we're realizing, one, they're not very educated. Our experts have kind of screwed the pooch.
Yeah, sure.
Because from everything from the SCOTUS decision on transgenderism to things like the price of eggs and milk, they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And if they actually go out and talk to people who farm, people who own dairy farms, it's quite a lucrative business if you can make it work.
Right. And you're talking about people don't know what they're talking about. So I don't think this was in RedState. I think I read this somewhere else, and it might have been Hot Air, your Salem equivalent, about the fact that these 4,000 kids went over to Egypt and tried to get into Gaza. Have you heard about this?
I heard about it. I did not catch it, and
apparently it never occurred to them to get visas.
Right.
They just thought they would be able to walk right into Gaza, and they were astonished that the Egyptians stopped them. And they literally, the quotes from the kids was, "Well, we can do this in the United States," and they don't understand you're not in the United States. And but also, have you seen the border between Egypt and Gaza? Have you seen it? It makes it dwarfs the Berlin Wall. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And it's not that they're trying to keep the Egyptians from leaving. They don't want the Palestinians coming in.
Exactly. That every nation, I shouldn't say every nation, most nations have way more restrictive immigration policies than America does.
Yeah.
And there's none of this crying due process and, give me a fair chance. It's like, you're illegal, you're either in jail or you're out the door. Yeah, one of the two.
Right.
There's no such thing as due process.
I still can't get over the gays for Gaza, queers for Palestine thing. I cannot get over this. It's like, you want to be gay, you go over there, and they'll throw you off a building.
Yeah, and they'll hang you from a crane.
Yeah, right.
There's video footage of this stuff. They don't tolerate it, and people have no concept.
Why are these people so stupid? That's not a rhetorical question. I actually want you to tell me. I don't know. What's going on?
Because they, kind of like Anna Navarro, they live in their little silo. They live in their little bubble. They never get outside of wherever they live. And they only listen to one news source, and every other news source is of the devil or is a lie. One of a former associate, I'll just put it that way, I would have called us friends at one point, but now she's just someone that I have been associated with in the past. She has, she's way left, and all she did was look at a headline and wigged out about it and basically accused me of lying. And it's just kind of like, first of all, read the article. I don't care if it does say RedState. Why don't you try reading it and see what it actually says? Then call me a liar and point out how I'm lying in the piece.
Oh, she was calling you a liar?
Yes. It was focused on the LA riots.
And
I had, and it wasn't even talking about the riot specifically. It was talking about the Los Angeles County District Attorney's response in the midst of his city, the city that he's supposed to be oversee up in chaos. And he's out talking about a sandwich that got renamed after his office once he got elected. It's like cognitive dissonance. You're an elected leader. Have some type of face that says, yeah, I know immigration is not necessarily my purview, but this is bad. Yeah. And anybody breaking laws in, that have to do with our city, you're gonna, say something. Instead, he's talking about a sandwich. So, the article wasn't even based on, the headline mentioned the fact that riots were happening.
Jennifer, if you ever need quotes about sandwiches, I know a lot of sandwiches. You can just call me up. I'll give you copious quotes on sandwiches. I can do that.
I bet.
All right. The thing that really bugged me about the LA riots was, I got to collect my thoughts here for a second. Sure. The fact that there were people saying, well, it's not happening all around town, and you live there and I live there, and it's a huge city. But the thing is, if you got half a dozen Waymo taxis on fire, isn't that enough?
It's not even the fact that, it's only happening in this isolated part of the city. There is a chain reaction that goes on with anything that happens in downtown LA. There's a whole bottleneck with the 101 freeway, the 5 freeway. Right. It screws up everything.
Right.
So don't tell me, oh, it's not happening in my part of town, so therefore it doesn't exist, or it's really not that bad. Yeah, right. It is bad. Yeah, this is property damage that you're going to have to pay for in your taxes.
It bothers the heck when people say that it isn't that bad. It's bad enough,
Yeah, it's someone actually redid that everything's fine meme with the dog drinking coffee with Karen Bass. Put her in there and she's drinking coffee and there's fire all around her and she's like, everything's fine.
Yeah, that's what they think. All right, they're falling apart, and David Hogg was removed from his position, which all just seemed to me that it was something that was done after the fact because they didn't like what he was saying. You know? And meanwhile, today just came out, big survey came out that said that the vast majority of Democrats nationwide are not pleased with their leadership. In other words, he might have been onto something.
He was onto something, straight up progressive, obviously. But you know what? That's the party. They're tired of the old fossils who are still trying to play games and deny that they've got a base problem.
I read this barely made the news, but I read this while I was on a vacation. I was at a funeral last week, and I'm reading that. And I don't even know who this woman is. I think she's from California. A representative is announced she's running for a re-election, and at the end of this month, she's going to be 89.
Wow!
What the hell? I mean, Christ Almighty!
Yeah.
And, it's nothing. I don't know. My personal thing is, it's not that. My problem is these people. If you got into Congress when you were 82, okay, I understand why you might stay a few more years. But most of these people that old have been there for 40 or 50 years. I don't know in her case. I don't.
Yeah.
Step aside.
And done absolutely nothing. It would be different. People like Chuck Grassley, an exception. Obviously, his constituencies love them, and the man is as sharp as a tack.
It's unbelievable how sharp he is. He's 92 years old.
Right, exactly.
Looking at him, he doesn't look a day over 70.
Right. But the rule is Dianne Feinstein, who they wheeled around until she croaked.
Right, I know. She was half dead.
Yeah. Or Joe Biden. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I want to address this because this is another piece you wrote a few days ago. This has barely made the news, and I think this is really important. I was talking about it based on your article a couple nights ago. I knew you were coming on, but about the fact, this thing about the Chinese Communist Party trying to fake votes for the 2020 election. This is really, really serious shit.
It is.
Hold it. You want to explain briefly what exactly went on here?
Sure. The Kash Patel, the FBI director of the FBI, has declassified basically intelligence that came to the FBI during or right before the 2020 election, the summer of the 2020 election, and the summer before. And the FBI saw the information, started investigating, and then someone from on high said, no, we have to revet the source, and so therefore let's table this. And so this is going on simultaneously at the same time when Customs and Border Protection was picking up all of these fake IDs of people coming across the border with these fake U.S. IDs. So basically, Kash Patel has come in. He's trying to clean house. He's trying to get transparency. Grassley had asked for this information ages ago from the Biden administration, and they ignored him. So Kash Patel said, let me declassify, and here's the information. And it showed that, for sure, that they printed all of these ballots which were weighted in favor of Biden, of then candidate Biden winning the election. And so it'll take some further investigation, obviously, but Grassley's a good investigator, as I made the point in the article. Brett Kavanaugh got saved because Grassley knew how to investigate, knew how to dig. And also his testimony, and Lindsey Graham did his thing. But and had Grassley not investigated, Blasey Ford's crazy story would have, they would have believed it and fell all over themselves, and it fell apart once Grassley came out and investigated and pulled the boyfriends who said don't believe anything she has to say, So this is all going to get investigated going back to this. And I'm sure there's going to be a ton of stuff that gets uncovered because of it. I mean, just the mere fact that President Trump, Sidney Powell, oh God, so many people that I can't name off the top of my head, who said there's something that went wrong with this election. We should look into this. Some people used the word fraud. Other people just said, why are we saying this was the best election ever, the safest, the most accurate one ever, when all of these inconsistencies show up? So now we're getting proof that yes, there were inconsistencies.
And the real terrible thing is, you can make an argument here that the Democrats were saying, well, the implication is that we're cheating, but here they weren't cheating. Or, they might have let it slide, because they're candidates, but they weren't actually doing this. And so it just basically proves the point that, I've always thought this mail-in ballot thing is bogus. Completely.
Oh, yeah. They totally did it to game the system, and we know that.
Right.
Because it's easy to commit fraud.
Right. Yeah. The only reason they didn't stop it is because it was for their candidate. That's it. The Chinese came in and from when was it you? And I can't remember if I read this in your article or somewhere else about the fact that there were probably a few thousand bogus votes that actually got through. Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that's in several elections, and that's in not just blue states. Alabama's had a couple of convictions of people who voted for Obama, and I believe voted in 2020. And the person got convicted, but the damage is done.
Jennifer, when we were at Kong News, we talked about this quite a lot, Jeff Meyer and I, about the fact that there is some serious evidence to suggest that in 2000 and 2004, the Republicans cheated the election. I don't know if you know that. It's like that. And they apparently did it by messing with the computers. It was not, this has been alleged here, but supposedly no one's ever found any computer tampering, but supposedly that's how the Republicans did it in 2000, 2004. And the amazing thing is it had nothing to do with that stupid thing that happened with the hanging chads.
Dangling chads, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't, apparently. But yeah, so apparently this is not cheating in elections is not a new thing, I don't think.
No, everyone says this was before my time, but obviously, Kennedy, that Kennedy won because Daley did some ballot stuffing. They were talking about stuffing ballot boxes.
Before your time's like 2006, right?
You're so kind.
No, no, that should be brought up too. And we've talked about that previously also, that yes, it's pretty much accepted now by historians that, well, it's actually specifically John Kennedy's father, Joe
Yeah,
Kennedy,
Joe P. Kennedy. Yeah,
that he screwed with the ballots in Cook County, and the election was so close that that turned Illinois and that turned the election. I mean,
yeah.
it still remains one of the closest elections in history. So so this is the proof that literally one county can make a whole difference in depending on
Big time, and
yeah.
that and again that it doesn't take widespread fraud. All it takes is some strategic fraud. Cook County was one. In 2020, it was Pennsylvania. I mean, that's all it takes.
Yeah, so I got another article here, and this is not from one of yours either. This was from Hot Air about the fact that there was a survey done this last week of, this is really amazing, 60,000 Americans. And Nate Silver said what they're trying to decide, this whole thing about the fact that all these surveys previously have said that liberals are significantly more unhappy than conservatives.
Yeah.
And so they polled 60,000 people, a huge sample, and they came to the conclusion that's absolutely correct. Liberals are way more unhappy than conservatives, and it spanned every single demographic, age range. It did not matter. It didn't matter. And so then the question is, what they're trying to address is why. So I have the three top reasons why people think this is. Liberals assume they are less happy because they're so sympathetic and conscientious that they're dragged down by other people's struggles. There's that. So the implication is conservatives are selfish. That people who feel oppressed identify with liberals because they feel the need for progress, and a strain on modern liberalism which valorizes misery and which sees depressive effect as proof of ideological commitment, which is the one that's
that
so
part.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that part. Misery loves company. I always say that, and it's true. They're miserable, and they want you to be miserable. Yeah. And it's like when you refuse to be miserable, or when you celebrate having children. I mean, there was some dumbass article that talked about, well, we shouldn't discount women. It's Father's Day, but we shouldn't discount the mothers. It's like, idiot.
We have a day for that. We have a day for that.
There's a whole day before, a whole month before that we have Mother's Day. Give fathers their due and give it their day.
Yeah,
it's like everything has to be undermined, and it's like, no, just celebrate men who are men and men who are fathers.
I had a woman on last night named Gilda Carl, and she goes by Dr. Gilda. She's been on a lot of talk shows. She has a new book called "Real Men Don't Go Woke," and we had a fascinating conversation. There's really startling statistics about the fact that in the last 20 years, suicide among men is up like 400%. I mean, it's really terrible.
It's heartbreaking because there has been a concerted effort for decades to destroy manhood, destroy men. I mean, let's go back to the 2024 election and who Kamala Harris chose to celebrate. These wimpy, ridiculous. Who did she choose as her running mate?
Yeah, right.
Wimpy, your governor.
Right.
This really bizarre, ridiculous man who was also tied to the Chinese Communist Party.
And the amazing thing, that actually deserved a discussion itself. The amazing thing is, if she had chosen Shapiro, she might have won.
Exactly. Because say what you will about Shapiro, he is at least a man, and presents that confidence, that swagger of being a guy. Guys could have related to him. Yeah, they Tim Walz, weirdo.
Yeah,
and just bitter. Again, going back to that miserable thing. Bitter family. His daughter rants all the time about why they lost.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to
his
be
wife is bizarre. It's like bitterness gets you nowhere.
I know. And then the amazing thing is, he's apparently been to China. He's been there 30 times. I haven't been anywhere in 30 times. I don't know if I've been down to the local McDonald's 30 times. He's been to China 30 times. What the hell?
And as a sitting congressman for nobody, it's like, it's sad that these things just get dropped. He really should be under investigation. They should keep this investigation going, but so much bandwidth, so little time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is one thing. I mean, I kind of perceive that Americans are getting sick of investigations in general. Do you kind of think that?
Oh, big time. You know, it's just like it's particularly since nothing ever happens. I mean, no one goes. People want to see orange jumpsuits. They want to see handcuffs, and with some key people. I am one of the people who wants to see Anthony Fauci in an orange jumpsuit.
Yeah,
and his wealth stripped from him.
And you're not alone.
What he did was unconscionable.
Right.
So this is what people want to see. So when they hear another investigation, as well as, you know, this Kash Patel expose of the 2020 election, it's just like, okay, yawn. Tell me when you're going to actually put somebody in jail.
So, all right, I'm going to get off track here. I don't care. The thing with Fauci, I don't understand the reasoning in his mind. Like what, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that, and this gets lost in this whole thing. He was the head of it's not the
NIH, the National Institute of,
he was the head of
infectious diseases and health.
Right. So he was the head of that for 37 years. He had the same job for 37 years. And I just assumed at some point he got so damn comfortable, he thought, well, no one's ever going to stop me or catch me ever. That's the only thing
he did, as well as he was serious when he sat up and said, I'm the science.
Yeah,
he thought he thought he was God. He thought he was the authority.
Yeah.
And you knew they were playing in our faces when you saw they did a whole email dump in 2020. Sadly, 2021. Sadly, it escaped most people's attention because everybody was, you know, fighting here and fighting there. But his emails reflect that it was just all about him.
Yeah. The thing about I am the science is one of the single most arrogant things I've ever heard anybody say ever about anything.
Well, to me, what's most ridiculous and most arrogant is the fact that, do you know he was filming his documentary during COVID? They made 2 documentaries of his career. They were filming this during COVID, when everybody was shut down, whenever people lost their businesses, and you're getting a documentary done.
I didn't. I mean, I guess I kind of knew that, but I never thought about it in those terms. I never. Yeah, that's crazy.
It's sick.
It is sick. That's right.
You're supposed to be. This is the most dangerous disease in the world. You're gonna die to everybody else, but I got time to, you know, get filmed and have camera crews come in, and it's disgusting.
In the meantime, the local bodega down on 50th and 5th Avenue in New York City went broke, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the small businesses wiped out. Los Angeles still has not recovered. Every business is closed.
Do you want to end this with a little comment on Juneteenth? First of all, do you want to talk about what exactly that is? Because I'm not certain a lot of people have this straight.
They have no clue what Juneteenth is. The Emancipation Proclamation, I believe, was declared, and I could be wrong, but I believe it was like January, February, 1863.
January 1st, 1863. Right.
1863.
Right.
So this proclamation went out, and, you know, throughout the South, the slaves were, you know, learning about their freedom and, you know, coming to terms with it, whatever needed to happen. Except this little county in Texas. They were the last to hear the news. And this was probably about a year later, maybe. Yeah. And again, don't talk to me about dates because not positive on those. But it was a while later that this county, the Union soldier rode in and said, hey, you're free. And it's just like, really? We
Yeah.
did not know this.
It's kind of like the Japanese who are stuck on the island, the soldiers who are stuck on the islands during the World War II, you know?
Right, and assuming that it's still World War II.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were assuming I'm still under slavery. And so, like anybody who gets freedom, any type of freedom, you're going to celebrate.
Yeah.
And so that Texas was big on the celebration before it became a national holiday, Juneteenth, where that day was celebrated about slavery finally ending and being wiped out of America. You know, we had our struggles, obviously. We did, you know, Reconstruction was a mess, the whole 9 yards, but that it was established is something to celebrate. Now, do I personally celebrate? Not really. Again, I know about it.
Yeah.
Read Langston Hughes' great book, loved it. But I'm not from Texas, as well as my family's not relative to that. It wasn't a part of my infrastructure, so I can appreciate it. I think, I mean, I don't celebrate Columbus Day. Hello.
Right. No,
but to acknowledge it and to have it, I think is perfectly important, because it's part of the fabric of American history.
That's right. It's a worthy thing.
And unfortunately, people always just want to make it a racist thing or a classist thing.
Well, the other thing is, I'm being pragmatic here. The proclamation was signed on January 1st, and that is already a holiday, so it would have gotten lost if they had done that. So, you know, it's probably better this way. That's why I look at it, you know.
Yeah, I think we need to start incorporating all of these things that make up the American story. Yeah. And sadly, most of what is considered Black history is relegated to February, as opposed to, no, we are a part of the American story.
Yeah.
And weave that in as much as possible.
It sounds like I'm changing the subject, but I'm not. You know, I have been, and I worked for a gay organization for years, and I've always been a huge supporter of the gay community. But it has been brought up lately that, why do they get a whole month? Wouldn't a week do? You know, now, okay. Yeah. So like the Black community gets a whole month, but they're a bigger community. It's like, you know, I don't know. It's like,
well, it's not even that, you know, we're a bigger community. It is about, I mean, you hear these stories from certain people. Oh, this person was gay, and, you know, George Washington might have been gay, and Abraham Lincoln we don't know that, but we do know that there are Blacks throughout the United States history. Benjamin Banneker, who helped fight in the Revolutionary War, Crispus Attucks. You know, there are, from all the way up there to the Tuskegee Airmen, to our modern day heroes now, we are all a part of the American story. Culture, music, you know, they like to complain about Black culture, music, rock and roll, all based in rhythm and blues.
Look, as a musician, you can't complain about Black music, because Black music is the start of American music.
Exactly.
You know? It's, even in classical music. I mean, there was
jazz.
His name. There's a famous Samuel Eldridge. Is that his name? The famous Black composer.
I think so. Yeah.
It's terrible. I should know this, but it's like I can't think off the top of my head. Yeah. You know? So there's a difference between people being weaved into the tapestry of American history, whether it was as a freedman or a slave. Frederick Douglass, my God,
you know, and you know, Booker T. Washington. There are just structures and institutions that would not have existed had we not existed.
I have to ask you this, because my opinion here doesn't matter. I think yours is much more important, and not because of the color of your skin either. Although that's what I'm going to get at here. I think that Martin Luther King would have been appalled by DEI. What do you think?
It's hard to say. I think so, because there was it with him. It wasn't about equity. They throw in that ridiculous equity word. Yeah. And to tell you the truth, it was, in my opinion, it wasn't even about equality. It was about, if you listen to and read the I Have a Dream speech and read any of his writings, he was basically saying, we have a right to the American dream. We are Americans. We have the same Bill of Rights and the Constitution. You start living up to that Constitution. Make it so, stop this inequity, because that's where it was inequity, where we have a certain standard to live by and you aren't living by that standard.
Right. Why do you think
that's bottom line?
There's a congressman who recently, oh no, this was Elise Wiesel, whatever that guy's name is, who floated this ridiculous thing. He said that nothing that happened constitutionally before 1965 should matter because that's when the voting right act.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think he's full of crap, but he has a point in the sense that basically that's kind of 1965 is kind of the beginning of the turning point of this whole thing. Why did it take 100 years for that to happen?
A lot of reasons. You had the whole, that happens in the South, this happens up here. You had presidents who actively rolled back gains for Woodrow Wilson, one of the most racist individuals in the world.
Isn't that weird? I mean, he was held up as he was an academic. He was like the president of Princeton or something like that, you know. And
he was the first progressive. I mean, the whole one world thing, and
he was a blatant racist.
And a blatant racist.
Right.
Had people would not give an audience to Ida B. Wells and Washington and Black leaders of that day when they wanted to talk to him about the obviously racist things he was doing to try to marginalize and destroy Blacks.
Yeah.
Lynchings went up. That's when lynchings really started to go crazy, as well as the KKK. It's like so much damage was done during that administration when so much progress had been done.
Yeah.
Before that.
Right. I don't know. We're crazy people, man.
Yeah. We are crazy people, and I also just think that too much is controlled by too few.
Yeah. Well, no, and it sounds like I'm diverting, but I'm not. There's a good reason the extraterrestrials don't want to land. We're stupid. We're stupid. We kill each other for no reason. It's like it's the stupidest goddamn crap, and we seem to repeat it over and over again. It's like, do we ever learn? I don't know. But I learned from you. I know that.
Well, thank you. Enjoy the conversation always.
Now you're going to be coming on. We're returning to our all-star panel a week from Monday. And you're going to be part of that. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Hey, I'm looking forward to being with the guys.
That's kind of we're kind of doing that by audience demand. People have actually said, that was a very, very big fan favorite thing. So, and I don't know why I cut it out. Well, actually I do, but there were reasons we're stupid. So, because I'm stupid too. They don't want to pick me up either. Well, Jennifer, I know you got to get back to beating your husband, so tell him I said hi. And,
I will.
And, I love you. So it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Love you too. You have an awesome
rest
of the week.
All right, you too. I'll see you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Jennifer Oliver Connell. She writes for RedState at redstate.com. She also has a Substack at asthegirlturns.com. And we have links on our blog to that, but I'm going to put them up anyway. Because we got a fantastic show here. We got two guests. Now I shouldn't say this out loud because I'm proud. This is just, it's not stupid, but I'm probably putting myself in a bad position. It is my goal here. Like I told you, we're booked like a month ahead. I mean, right now we're having no trouble booking guests, and that's great. I'd like to have two guests on in every show. I'd really like to do that. But, right now, I mean, to fill up the schedule, it's 18 guests a month, and that would double that. So, but we have two guests tonight. So we're going to take a little logo break here, and we're going to return with Jonathan Lockwood. He's a former U.S. Army colonel, military historian. He's written a couple books on the Israeli Iranian crisis. So he's going to be joining us in just a moment. Stay tuned, please. Joining us from his home in Virginia, the inestimable, did I say that right?
Inestimable.
Yes. Author and military historian, and I'm glad you're coming on today because you know all about this stuff. So it's 3:00 Eastern time on Thursday afternoon. Where are we on this Israeli and Iranian war right now, Jonathan? What's going on?
Well, Israel clearly has Iran on the ropes, and
I have to stop you.
Yes.
Everyone seems almost shocked at how well this has gone for them. Their planning is like almost unbelievable. Is that a good assessment?
It is a lesson. The Israelis are giving the rest of the world and in the United States in particular a lesson on military planning and thoroughness and the importance of inside intelligence. The Israelis obviously have assets within Iran, which they aren't revealing for obvious reasons. And because of this, they've been able to strike. They now have a high assurance of not only being able to take out the nuclear facilities and as well as a significant number of their military and political leadership, but they also have a decent chance of permanently destroying Iran's nuclear capability by means not necessarily with bunker buster bombs, if the U.S. decides to use those, but they have the inside people who would be able to direct the equivalent of Israeli special forces to those facilities and be able to destroy them on the ground with a special operation. So right now, and the Israelis have all the motivation in the world to do this, because remember, to Israel, Iran with a nuclear weapon is an existential threat.
Yeah.
Even though Israel has the Iron Dome for guarding against ballistic missile attacks, that Iron Dome system has an effectiveness rate of 90%, which is very impressive. Okay, but that 10% can be really bad, especially if one of those ones that gets through happens to have a nuclear warhead. And if a nuclear warhead hitting a place in Israel, particularly Tel Aviv, would be almost beyond catastrophic.
Well, Jonathan, everyone in America, not everybody, but a lot of people are concerned about our quote unquote involvement. And what I want to ask you is, what is the definition of involvement? For example, if we send over fighter jets that fly over Iran, but we don't have any troops on the ground, is that involvement? I mean, this gets so murky, and I'm to the point where I'm wondering.
There are levels of involvement. You can have logistical involvement, supplying Israel with all the arms and other things that they need, such as when Secretary Hegseth diverted 20,000 drone interceptors to Israel away from Ukraine. And so that's logistical involvement. You can have intelligence involvement, where the United States supports Israel very quietly with intelligence information, all the intelligence information that commands through its satellites or through other assets. They can get the intelligence community involved in providing selected bits of intelligence information to Israel that way. There are levels of involvement. The highest level of involvement, obviously, is if you were to commit troops on the ground in an actual operation in Iran, which I think is very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
Simply because of if you take a simple look at the geography of Iran, it is highly mountainous, and would be an absolute nightmare for, even more so than almost as much as Afghanistan would be was a nightmare for American forces to operate in. So Iran, formerly called Persia, has been a very long-lasting civilization for good reason. Its geography makes it a very difficult country to conquer. So,
all right, I'm going to kind of go off track here because you mentioned this. My impression is that the Iranian people are 80-20 against the regime. Is that what you gather to here? They don't like
that is the, it seems that the Ayatollahs are the extreme element which took over and has been essentially anti-Jewish, anti-American. They've been using the death to America, death to Israel. They've been chanting that for decades.
Oh, Jonathan, I just heard this today. Just today, I heard that the Iranian legislature starts every session with a chant "Death to America." That's actually like official. They start their legislative sessions with that.
Kind of reminds you way back during the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage. One Roman senator ended every one of his speeches with "Carthago delenda est," Carthage must be destroyed. And so it has a certain historical precedent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's not unheard of. But yeah, for them to say begin and end their speeches with "Death to America," yeah, they're serious. And so therefore, that is one country. And President Trump is absolutely correct in saying this country must not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon ever.
Yeah. So where do you think Trump is on this? I mean, and this gets back to, this is all very murky. So back to the definition of what involvement is. So yeah, I think everyone agrees with you. We don't want any troops on the ground. That's like the ultimate involvement. But
there's no need. There's really no need.
There's no need. That's right. Besides that, though, aren't we already in bed with the Israelis already? I mean, it's like,
good heavens, yes. We when you think about it from a standpoint of, because President Trump considers us to be a Christian nation, and theologically, when you look at it, the Christians are and should be the natural allies of the Jewish people,
right?
Because Christianity could not have existed unless Judaism had preceded it. Jesus Christ, after all, was Jewish.
Correct.
So there should be, to me, anti-Semitism from a Christian perspective is absolutely illogical.
All right, well, hold on. I got to stop you on this. And I know I'm just ranting here, but I still want you to comment. And I think I've asked you this before. Did you ever think, you and I are about the same age. Did you ever think 50 years later that people in America that Jew hating would become such a thing? I still can't even wrap my mind around it. I don't understand.
I mean, it makes me think of Dr. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. Remember when he said, "I have a dream that one day my children will live in a land where men are judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character"?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Martin Luther King would be crying his eyes out if he were alive today to see this.
He would.
And here we are with anti-Semitism. We're going back to the same ugly attitude that preceded World War II, and because we were rather ambivalent about the stories coming out of the European theater about atrocities against the Jews. Right. We weren't willing to believe. We just could not believe that they could be that horrible. We thought it was propaganda.
Right.
But then when we went into Germany, when we went into the death camps, and we saw with our own eyes, and General Eisenhower then insisted that pictures be taken and as much evidence be gathered about all of this. Because he said, because someday some bastard is going to claim that this never happened.
Right. That's
he
right.
He wanted evidence. He wanted it all documented.
And you're an historian, Eisenhower was a good dude, and
yes,
although his presidency is rising in stature, it's still underrated, I think.
Yes, he is.
He was very good. You correct me if I'm wrong. He was very good at action by not doing anything. He knew when not to do something.
He got us out of the Korean War, ended it. He ended it by threatening the Chinese with nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And, you have to be credible when you do that. This was the conqueror of Hitler speaking to the Chinese, and to the Chinese, they believed Eisenhower. He was credible. And so they ended the Korean War. And Eisenhower did not get us into any new wars, which is also to his credit. So this is, and interestingly enough, at the end of his presidency, in his farewell speech, he warned us about the rise of the military-industrial complex.
It's the most amazing thing ever that the only 5-star general in American history actually talked about the military-industrial complex.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
But that speaks worlds to the intellectual honesty of the man.
Yeah.
And so he gets, yes, he is one of our most underrated presidents, as is, believe it or not, Ulysses S. Grant. Even though his 2 terms, they had a high level of corruption, not directly his fault. He was taken advantage of in a lot of respects, but he created the Department of Justice, and he crushed the Ku Klux Klan, which was conducting active violent activities against Republicans and free blacks in the South. So anyway, there's all sorts of historical precedents where we have not been on our best behavior as a people, or some aspect.
I'm going to get off the subject here a little bit, or onto the subject we're talking about. So, and you may disagree with me on this, so that's fine. This is my own personal opinion. That since Reagan, in the last 45 years, we've only had 2 truly effective presidents, and that's Clinton and Trump. Everyone else has basically been, I would say, mediocre or worse, you know? And the reason those guys, and this is what I actually wanted your comment on, the reason those guys, in my mind, were effective is, well, frankly, they did something.
Yeah. Well, Clinton, he was compared to the other Democrats today, he was relatively moderate.
I don't think he could get in the Democratic Party today.
No, he wouldn't.
No.
And because he also, remember, he reached across the aisle and cooperated with Congressman Newt Gingrich, Contract with America. And between the 2 of them, by the end of the 20th century, we had a balanced budget.
Right.
And a budget surplus. We were developing a budget that could have started paying off the national debt.
Right.
And unfortunately for us, we got suckered into Iraq and Afghanistan after the 9/11 attacks.
Okay, hold on. Let's talk about that for a little bit, because I think we can bring back to the present day. So I'm sitting, this is well before I got into the news business. I'm sitting at home in my underwear, and it's 2001 or 2002. And President Bush says, well, you know, after all this stuff that happened, we were attacked and all this sort of stuff, we're going to go into Iraq. And I'm thinking, well, why? What did they have to do with this? And they said, no, it's for the good. It's for the common good. And I don't think I don't know, we got anything out of that, did we?
Well, and arguably, I would say we did not get very much out of that. Now, remember that in Operation Desert Storm in 1991, George Bush Sr., he kicked Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, because in his view, Saddam was overreaching by trying to occupy Kuwait.
Right.
He kicked them out of there. And then he had the opportunity, he very quickly defeated the Iraqi forces in front of him. And the question was asked, well, why won't you go on to Baghdad? Yeah, because they could have gone on to Baghdad at that point. And George Bush Sr., to his credit, because he has probably arguably the best resume for entering the presidency that anybody I've ever seen, he said he did not want to get caught in the middle of a civil war.
Right.
Very prescient, very smart. And it's a pity that his son did not follow his example, because he allowed himself to get suckered into what he thought was going to be a relatively quick victory. And instead we disrupted the power balance. Iraq was acting as an effective counterbalance to Iran. All right, we were supporting Iraq against Iran.
In Bush Jr.'s and W's possible defense, did they have enough information to know that?
To know what specifically?
You know that they would disrupt by going into.
No, they did not. They did not have. They could not have predicted the consequences of their actions.
Okay.
By occupying Iraq and effectively destroying an effective counterweight against Iran, they basically gave Iran a big break that they really did not deserve. And so it complicated things. And it also got us involved in military conflicts that we really did not need to get involved in.
Right. It's the proverbial forever wars thing. So if we go back to the present day now, that's the big complaint with Trump. If we actually get, quote, get involved in this, as some people think it'll never stop. What do you, I have to? I'll just preface this. I personally don't think that, but you're the guest here. What do you think?
I agree with you on this one because because Trump and his advisors, they have a very clearly defined objective: destroy Iran's nuclear capability. Make sure that to the greatest extent possible, in cooperation with the active support of Israel, to ensure that Iran never becomes a nuclear power. Because if they do, their degree of, and especially if the Ayatollahs are in power, you would have a fanatical religious leadership that would show no hesitation about using a nuclear weapon once they had it. And because they hate the Jewish state of Israel so much, they would unleash that nuclear weapon against Israel just out of sheer vindictiveness.
And Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they've also announced, they've been very public about the fact that if they had those nuclear weapons, they would sell them to the highest bidder, nilly-willy, right? There's that too also?
Yep, there is that element. And so that is why it is an imperative for the United States to make sure that Iran never gains a nuclear capability. Now, oddly enough, it's safer for Russia to have its nuclear arsenal right now because Russia regards its nuclear arsenal rather differently. They regard their nuclear arsenal, well, the Russian term for their nuclear forces is Ядерные устрашения сил, nuclear intimidation forces, because they translate deterrence as intimidation. That tells you a lot about the Russian attitude toward. They see their nuclear arsenal not only as a symbol of great power status, which they have said. Matter of fact, Boris Yeltsin had said in the speech to the Russian Duma, the only reason Russia is considered a great power is because its armed forces have nuclear weapons. That tells you pretty much all they need to know about the Russian attitude.
Would you agree with that? Do you think that's true?
That's true. They see that it's true from their perspective. They see their great power status and their ability to intimidate or pressure the West and operate and achieve their foreign policy goals. Notice how during this entire Russian-Ukrainian war, the Russians have been brandishing their nuclear arsenal to play upon Western fears of nuclear escalation in an effort to prosecute their war against Ukraine, although it's kind of backfiring on them because they are not achieving their objectives militarily. They insist that they are grinding forward, but they're doing so at very high cost. And
Jonathan, why aren't they? Are they just nowhere near militarily as competent as people thought they were?
That's correct. That's one. They're not as competent as they thought they were. Plus, another thing, the Russians have never, in their history, and especially in the 20th century, they have never been very good at logistics, the science of supply. During World War II, the Russians got their supplies to the front with horse-drawn wagons.
Yeah, that's good.
And unless, if it had not been for the fact that the United States during World War II was supplying Russia with Ford trucks, which the Russians were very grateful for, they drove those trucks to death. Even long after the war, they used them as long as they could.
Well, they run real good if you'll choose the grammar.
Exactly. And so they were simple to operate. So the Russians were able to have a motorized supply chain, a motorized supply effort, because that was what enabled the Red Army to drive Nazi Germany's forces out of Russia. Because they weren't going to do it with horse-drawn wagons.
No.
They wouldn't have been able to supply a continuous offensive required to drive the Nazi Germany. And it would have ended up in a situation like World War I with Germany still occupying part of Russia.
Yeah.
At the time the United States and the West got in there. So
we talked about this on a previous show, but it bears you repeating because it sounds better coming from you than from me about how incredible the Americans got their crap together during World War II. I mean, the Ford Motor Company went from making cars to making fighter planes in like 2 minutes, and they were churning out a dozen a day. It's like really unbelievable.
The average production of aircraft during World War II, United States involvement, averaged 60,000 aircraft of all types during the 5 years that the United States, 60,000 aircraft per year.
That's 1,000.
That's just one. That's just one category.
Right.
And it's just absolutely astonishing. If you could go in a time machine and you could witness the home front during World War II, you would see a United States totally mobile, the entire population totally mobilized for an unlimited war.
Yeah.
And the most common saying on the home front during World War II was, "Don't you know there's a war on?"
Uh-huh. And so God, Jonathan, there's so much I want to talk to you about. And that reminds me of my friend. I have a friend who works at NASA who's a scientist there. And he's told me, he says, okay, we went to the moon in 1968 with no computers. Basically, it was they had a calculator on board the Apollo spacecraft. That was it, with no computers. And he said the terrible thing is, now, they are planning on doing this again. But the last time I talked to him, he says, we couldn't do it now. There's too much bureaucracy around here. It's really terrible. At some point, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, isn't there?
Well, here's my interesting suggestion, that there is a workaround solution, and it would involve President Trump upgrading, telling Secretary Hegseth and other folks to upgrade the U.S. Space Force with a space fleet, a manned space fleet. Where do you get the space fleet from? You get it from SpaceX. You go to Elon and say, Elon, old buddy, we really need your Starships and your Falcon Heavies and your Falcon 9s. Start getting those, get all the remaining bugs out of those Starships. Make sure they don't blow up, and get them operational so that we can support a mission back to the moon, and you can have a space fleet which can take on certain key missions like becoming the central pillar of the Golden Dome defense.
Yeah.
You arm those starships with lasers, and you have an entirely different equation. Right now, people are talking about building many satellites in order to block intercontinental ballistic missiles. Well, based on my experience with the 1997 Winter War game, I discovered something very interesting. When you have satellites versus satellites in low Earth orbit, you have a Mexican standoff. It's very unstable. The side that fires first is going to have the advantage.
Yeah.
So you don't want satellites versus satellites. You want a space fleet versus satellites, because if the Russians or the Chinese use their counter space weapons to fire on satellites, well, nobody cares because satellites don't have mothers. But if those satellites fire on a U.S. Space Force Starship, then that is a clear and unmistakable act of war. And that's a much stronger deterrent against space warfare than would be just having satellites up there.
Do you know, Jonathan, this is not, I actually don't know the answer. Do you know what they plan on replacing the International Space Station with? They're planning decommissioning it in the next few years. And it's probably time. I mean, it's been up there for like 30 years or something like that.
I can't really speak to their specific plans, what they would be willing to do. What a good suggestion would be for SpaceX to take up that and create basically you could have starships acting as mini space stations up there. You put them in orbit,
right?
And they've shown they have the capacity to resupply those starships in orbit. Right. They can resupply them. They can get manpower down from them. You could have a constellation of starships. That space fleet, let's say you had 8 starships equally spaced apart. Just imagine, picture it in your mind. 45 degrees apart in a big circle. Yeah, exactly. And they're all armed with lasers. So you have a series of interlocking shields that can shoot down any ballistic missile that is launched by either Russia or China, which effectively neutralizes their nuclear arsenal. You're not relying on satellites, you're relying on starships, which is a much stronger deterrent. You also those same starships could take on other missions, such as, you'll smile at this, cleaning up space junk.
Yeah, well, that needs to be done.
It needs to be done. So you give that mission to the Space Force with its space fleet. They can clean up the junk.
I think, if I'm right, NASA tracks every single piece of hardware is bigger than like a baseball or something like that. Yeah. And it's like there's 50 or 60,000 of them up there. There's so much crap in the orbit.
We have to take it. We have to relearn the lesson we all learned in kindergarten. Pick up after yourself and clean up your mess.
we're gonna have to send ships up there literally just to pick this crap up.
But you might as well give that mission to the Space Force fleet, because that would be one of their ongoing missions: clean up the junk.
It is a deterrent to national security. So you could justify it in that reason alone. All right, I want to get back to the current conflict.
Yes.
Here. So we're like all over the place, and I love it, Jonathan.
Yes, we are. Don't you love it?
I do. I love it. All right, people are concerned that if we get more involved in this conflict, that it's going to lead to World War III. Now, this is my take on this. Once again, I want your comment. I don't believe that's true, but for example, conversely, if China decided to go into Taiwan, I think that's World War III. That's the way I look at this. But I don't see that happening here. What say you?
I don't see it happening. I don't see China going into Taiwan at this point either, simply because China has enough problems of its own with its economy,
right,
and other things to be able to sustain any kind of significant conflict. And China going against Taiwan, the Taiwanese are fully aware. I mean, they are fully prepared with their, because launching an amphibious invasion of Taiwan from China, that would require a level of sophistication in amphibious operations and having air superiority.
And Jonathan, I don't know the answer to this question. How far in nautical miles is Taiwan from mainland China? I don't really know.
I can't.
200-300 miles.
It would be comparably somewhat farther from China than, say, for example, than the Normandy beaches were in World War II.
Right. Well, that's 22 miles. So yeah, right. Yeah.
So it would be more difficult for the Chinese to logistically, because the Chinese haven't demonstrated that they are any great shakes as far as logistical capability either. So they had difficulties when they launched a punitive operation against North Vietnam in 1979. They engaged in a punitive operation, a very short range operation, because the Chinese couldn't sustain it logistically. Yeah, they could defeat the North Vietnamese forces immediately in front of them, but they couldn't sustain that operation for very long. They pulled back after, quote unquote, having taught the North Vietnamese a lesson.
So we have a lot of people here talking smack, basically signifying nothing, don't we?
Yes, we do.
All right,
that's not surprising.
No, it isn't.
You have a whole bunch of military analysts and I notice they all tend to arrive at some sort of consensus. They don't want to be caught as the outlier, looking foolish. So they're all being very pessimistic about Ukraine.
Me as a person who does this for a living, make a prediction and just be right or wrong. I'm going to tell you about a prediction I made where I'm wrong, and you might find this really interesting. So I talked about this on the show the last couple of weeks. About December or January, when we were on Blog Talk Radio, we used to get a lot more calls than we do now. I got a call from a guy, and I later verified from his IP address he was in Singapore. He claimed he was an Iranian journalist living in exile in Singapore. That's what he claimed. He had the accent. Like I said, I checked out his location, so I'm assuming he was telling me the truth. He said at that time, that what the Pentagon didn't want to talk about is that, and this is like about 6 months ago, that Iran already had a nuclear weapon. They had maybe a handful of them. And I not only did I believe him, I was saying the same thing at the same time. So I was basically corroborating what he was saying. Now, it's plainly obvious now I was wrong, because I think if they had one, they would have used it already in the last week. And not only that, and then they, the mullahs get on the Twitter and they're saying, oh yeah, tomorrow we're going to change. What happens overnight is going to change history for centuries. Oh, they got nothing. They have nothing at all. It's all bullshit. So, all right. First of all, how far do you think that if left unencumbered, how far do you think how long would it take them to get a nuclear weapon?
Well, just from my perspective, what I have available, I have to look at all the open sources, and would have to say that the current leadership is and Israel, they're absolutely correct in regarding the danger as imminent enough that they feel they had to take action. They could not afford to. It's not a question of how long. If they believe that Iran has the capability to eventually get a nuclear weapon and a warhead, then they have no choice. They have, from their perspective, it's an existential threat to them. They must take it out or suffer the consequences of possible national annihilation.
And do you think that people in the United States, when you talk about existential threats, I think people throw these terms around so casually, they can't really wrap their minds around it. Because the way I look at this is that, yeah, Israel was number one on their list of places they wanted to bomb, but America was number two. And there is a legitimate concern here of some people who think we're overstepping by getting farther into this about the fact that they will clandestinely start to attack places in the U.S. My personal thing is I don't think they have their shit together enough to do that, but it is possible, isn't it? I mean, obviously,
you could have them activating sleeper cell, what their version of sleeper cells in the United States, and you might have isolated acts of terrorism taking place. But we have enough of a law enforcement and other means of self-defense that well, it kind of reminds me of what the Japanese Admiral Yamamoto, when he was asked after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and two things he says, I fear that all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant,
right,
and filled him with a terrible resolve.
Right.
And also, presumably, he was asked after the attack on Pearl Harbor what he thought about invading the United States. And his response was, I would never invade the United States. There would be a rifle beneath every blade of grass.
Yeah.
And if that was back in 1942,
right.
Nowadays there are probably two or more rifles beneath every blade of grass.
Yeah. All right.
Jonathan, yeah.
Last question here before we leave. What do you think Trump is going to do? What do you think is going to happen here in the next week or so?
Ooh, wow.
I'm asking you.
What do I think Trump is going to do?
Yes.
Oh, my Lord, that man makes his living and makes his money out of being unpredictable. Yeah. So this is a really hard one. He is going to make the maximum use of his inherent unpredictability, and he is going to rely very heavily on Israel to finish the job for him. He will support Israel quietly to the maximum extent possible, and he is not.
Will he send our B-2s in?
Will he send? If he comes to the conclusion that the B-2s are necessary to finish the job, to give it a almost lead pipe cinch to finish the job, then he will no doubt do it. But he will probably rely on his staff coordinating with the Israelis to get their estimate of are the Israelis confident that they can permanently take out Iran's nuclear capability. If he gets the perception from the Israelis, which I believe he trusts a lot more, that they can do it themselves, then he will hang back, and he'll make very supportive public noises, but he will not actually go to the trouble of sending in the bunker busters. But if there is doubt in his mind that the Israelis can get the job done, well, then he'll pull the trigger. But it all relies on his personal estimate of how much does he trust the Israelis to get the job done effectively. That's the key question in his mind.
Jonathan, I can't thank you enough for blessing us with your knowledge and your experience, and I really, really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And we'll talk to you again. Take care. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Lockwood, former U.S. Army colonel, retired military historian, author of 2 books, both on Amazon. And before that, Jennifer Oliver O'Connell. We got it going on tonight, don't we, man? It's like normally this is part 2, but I suppose because we had 2 guests, maybe it's part 3. I don't know. You tell me. What I was talking, what Jonathan and I were talking after that recorded interview about the fact that I just found this out a couple days ago. The B-2 bomber, stealth bomber that the Americans have, first of all, they cost $2 billion a piece. That, yes, every single airplane is $2 billion. And it's the most advanced airplane ever made by the United States. And it's the only single airplane we've ever manufactured that is not allowed to be sold to any other parties. In other words, it's strictly for use by the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force. There's some, I'll tell you, there's some rumor that's been going around for a while that the reason they don't sell it and the reason it costs so much money is because there might be some sort of anti-gravitic or anti-gravity assist regarding how that airplane flies. Now, no one's doubting the fact it's an airplane. It flies through the air and it flies through the air by lift generated by the wings. No, there's no doubt about that. But apparently, supposedly, it has some help by some sort of anti-gravity device. That's supposedly the case, and they don't want to get out, which is the reason they do not sell it to anybody. I don't know. This is part 3 of the show, or the B block, or the C block, or however you want to. And it's usually regards science. And I got 3 interesting things here before we part for the weekend. First of all, this did not make the news very much, and I think partly because it's very hard to explain. So I'm going to try my best to explain it to you and then tell you what's going on. A college, and I didn't even write down which college it is. Some researchers went to Antarctica. Yeah, the South Pole. They went to Antarctica to do a neutrino test. Now, what are neutrinos? Neutrinos are in the nucleus of every atom. It's the smallest subatomic particle known to man at the present time. It's very, very small. It's so small they pass through everything. It's basically like, photons are light, right? Light is made out of photons, but photons don't go through everything. I mean, I don't have to tell you, you got a window and that's clear and the photons go through that, but you put up your bed sheet and the photons don't go through that, or, probably something solid, probably what better example. But at any rate, yeah. Neutrinos go through everything. On an average day, there's probably billions of neutrinos that pass through your body, and you don't know. You're not none the wiser. So the experiment is that what the people, the physicists doing this, they're trying to track neutrinos to their original location because, like light, like photons, neutrinos generally travel in a straight line unless something moves them. Got it? Okay, so why are they going to Antarctica? Because it's the least busy places on Earth. It's the least place on Earth where they're going to get interference from all the other crap that human civilization has developed. That's the reason. It's not perfect, but it's the best they can do. So what they do is they launch these balloons at the South Pole with these neutrino catching devices in them, and they can figure out which direction the neutrinos they've caught have been going, and then they trace them back to their original locations. That would be like tracing, billions of light years away, but that's what they do. That's the thing. So they did this experiment, and what just completely rattled them is that, yeah, they got plenty of neutrinos from space. They also got a bunch of them coming from underneath the ice, and they were not expecting that. So they did a little more investigation, and not only were neutrinos coming up through the ice, radio signals were too. Not radio waves, radio signals, like artificial radio signals, were coming from underneath the ice, coming up to the surface. Because, radio waves go through everything too. It's the same type of deal, and they can't figure out why there's radio waves coming from underneath the ice. And, take your best guess, man, because I don't know what it is. I don't know. I don't know if there's aliens down there. I have no freaking idea. Now, there have been aliens rumored to be at Antarctica for like 50 years. Apparently, the Nazis talked about them. The fact that the Nazis did actually have a base down there. I mean, that is not. Most people think that's myth, but that's more or less true. Maybe it wasn't as developed as people thought it was, but they did actually go down there and try to set up some operations. This is, of course, before they lost the war. So that's actually a true thing. But there's been things flying around about aliens at the South Pole for ages. Admiral Byrd, it was called, I think, Project High Jump, if I'm right. They sent a whole flotilla of Navy warships down to Antarctica, and it was never really, supposedly, it was all for research purposes. Well, they came back way earlier than they were expected to, and Admiral Byrd gave an interview to some Norwegian newspaper, and he said humans will never be going down there ever again, or something like that. It was just, I mean, it was very, very ominous. He basically said we were chased out of there. Well, who's chasing you out of there? Well, that's a good question, because there's no humans down there, especially in the 1940s and 50s. There was nothing down there, but we got chased out of there. So, and that was Admiral Byrd. So that's been going on forever. You know, supposedly there's this very well-known story of a, and this is actually true. This is verified. There is a place near the actual geographic South Pole which no one in the American Air Force is allowed to fly over, and no one's ever known why, because no one's ever flown over it. Well, apparently, during a medical emergency, they had to get somebody out of, what is it? Is it Monroe Station? Is that the name of the station that's the U.S. keeps in Antarctica? They had to get somebody out of there, and they got an exception to fly over the spot to get them to medical safety as quickly as possible. And supposedly the people on that airplane looked down and they saw a giant hole in the ice, is what they saw. And they apparently said they saw stuff in the hole too, but it's very, very mysterious. That's what's going on in Antarctica. This thing about the neutrino thing, this is just a couple weeks ago. So, and like I said, I don't know if I did a very good job explaining it, forgive me, but I think the reason this did not make the news very much, I mean, this was in a couple of science, I think it was in Popular Science, I think, put this in, or whatever. It was because it's so hard to explain, I think. So meanwhile, Mark Zuckerberg, who runs Facebook and the Meta Corporation, they're working on their AI, and they're not pleased with it. They don't think it's going well. It was supposed to be released, I guess, shortly, and they're delaying that because they say the tests aren't going well at all. So to get some better engineering minds in there, they're trying to raid OpenAI, which is run by a guy named Sam Altman. OpenAI, they run ChatGPT, and they're probably the premier company in America doing this right now. They're trying to raid some of their engineers. They are offering, get a load of this, they are offering $100 million bonuses for people who sign up, for people who jump ship from OpenAI to Meta. If they want you, they'll give you as a signing bonus $100 million. That's you personally. Now, my friend and I got a friend in finance, and as an exercise, we've always kind of figured, how much money does it take to live well in America without ever having to work again? Now, and the thing is, this is an amazingly rhetorical question, because most people who are fabulously rich continue working. Have you ever noticed this? And that's because my same friend, his theory is that all men that retire die in 2 years. He's got a point. You know, it's like, I don't know about you, I even look at my family, it's astonishing. People retire and they knock off, man. It's like, you know, so okay, so here's the math that we came up with. The amount is $20 million. If someone gives you $20 million, and this is how the breakdown is, all right, someone gives you $20 million, right? Half of it goes to taxes right off the top. You got $10 million left. Okay, you invest the $10 million in, your standard bullshit investments, and that will pay an average of 5 to 7% a year if you're relatively conservative and don't want to lose the money. Okay, so let's say 5%. Okay, so 5% of $10 million is $500,000. Now, on that, you're going to pay about 21% capital gains tax. So you're going to end up with your $20 million investment or original cash outlay. You're going to end up with about $400 million a year. $400,000 a year, and basically $1,000 a day. That's completely tax free because you already paid the taxes on it. So, and most people could live off that fairly comfortably forever, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's a little about a little less than 400,000. Yeah. Okay. So I'm thinking, okay, that's $20 million. So the thing is, all right, if you're going to get a bonus of $100 million, well, you're doing well better than that. Why do you have to work again? Well, you have to work because that's the reason you got the money. That's the reason. So, and of course, there are a lot of brilliant minds in America, everywhere. They're all over the place. And yeah, these people they're brilliant with their AI stuff. And that leads me to the last topic for tonight, which is really, really fascinating. So there's this guy named Michael Brown, and we've talked about him on the show previously. He's one of the UFO whistleblowers. In other words, he's worked in government, in the United States government, and he has, signed the papers and stuff to allow him to talk freely to Congress, not necessarily the press. And that's a very big distinction there. He can talk to Congress, but not necessarily he can't bust his security oath to the public, but he can to Congress. And he's one of those people that signed those waivers so that he can do that. He put out a tweet on the Twitter machine a couple days ago that's really, really ominous. It's addressed to Elon Musk, and it's about all sorts of stuff. First of all, it's about the stuff that, according to Brown, the United States government has had a version of AI for several years now that is so advanced that it became sentient. Now, the problem with that whole scenario is you got to define what sentient is. I've had Brian Trilly on this show. He wrote the book Soulless Intelligence, and it's still the best book I've read on this subject. I was supposed to have another guy on Monday. He never showed up to talk about the same thing. His publicist assures me he's going to again. We'll see. Trilly came to the conclusion, and he's an AI executive too, that AI will never become sentient, conscious, or have a soul, although it will be and is intelligent. So the difference in these terms are consciousness is what humans have that makes us supposedly human. It's a certain type of self-awareness. A soul is something that apparently exists outside of your brain. And sentience is, well, I don't know what sentience is. That self-awareness, that's the thing. All this stuff blends together. There's no real good definitions for any of this stuff. But Trilly's argument and his what he's proposing or postulating, and what I agree with totally, is that only humans can be conscious, or biological beings anyway, at least, or maybe humans. And the reason I think that is because there's a lot of physical evidence now that indicates that consciousness may not be in your head. Consciousness may be a signal sent out by the universe, a signal as in a radio wave or radio frequency. The best analogy I've ever heard is people say, well, okay, you have a television set, right? Now, okay, your television's hooked up to cable, but let's say it's hooked up to antenna, right? And it's getting over-the-air broadcasts. The television busts and you can't see the broadcast anymore, but that doesn't mean the signal is still there. And the analogy here is that that's your body. Your body dies, but the signal is still there. It's just that your body can't render it anymore, just like a television can't render it if it's busted. That's the best analogy I've heard. So if you buy that, basically machines can't become conscious and machines won't have souls. Soul being... That's the other thing. So what's the definition of that? So let's say the definition of a soul is an electrical signal put out by your body that can exist outside of your body or apart from it. There's much research now that's been done that the electrical pattern in your brain can exist outside of your brain. And a lot of people think that might be physically, or in scientific terms, what a soul is. So, and I understand a lot of people don't buy any of this stuff. I totally understand that. I understand. But then we're talking about like AI machines here. So, one of the things that, going back to Matthew Brown, one of the things that he's alleging in his tweet is that the American government had, and the past tense here, had an AI that was so powerful it became sentient. In other words, apparently it became self-aware. And he said they quote unquote murdered it. They killed it. Now, you would kill it by unplugging it. Now, the interesting thing about that is that that's the one thing when I Trilly on the show about, and that was about 2-3 months ago. I don't even know the episode number or the date. I don't know. I should go back and look. I did call him on this one fact. He wrote this book with his brother Greg, who's not as well known as he is. So he was the front man, the point man. I said, well, what about self-preservation? So he said that there's no, his contention is that these machines, they can fake sentience, they can fake consciousness, but it's all fake. They're pretending. They don't actually have it. And my thing was, what about self-preservation, which I will call, a lot of other people call the HAL problem. That would be from 2001, A Space Odyssey. So the thing is, if you don't know the movie, and the thing is, it's not really mentioned in the movie. You have to read the book. So HAL is the onboard computer on the trip to Jupiter, and there's 9 astronauts on there, and all but 2 of them are frozen and suspended animation. Right? Got that? Okay. So HAL is the third companion to the 2 astronauts that are left awake to get the ship to Jupiter. All right. Now, what they don't know, what they being the astronauts, what the astronauts don't know is that HAL has been programmed to specifically do something regarding extraterrestrials when they get to Jupiter. And HAL's basically been keeping that a secret. But that said, HAL is supposed to be, once he does this particular mission, which is never really explained, but it's in general terms, he's supposed to be deactivated. He's supposed to be turned off. I guess during the course of the mission, it's 9 months, Hal starts thinking, well, if I'm turned off, that means I'm dead. And Hal says, well, I don't want to die. He's talking to himself. So in the process, when they start to get to Jupiter, he starts methodically killing all the astronauts on board. And he succeeds with all but one of them, at which, ultimately, that's Dave. I can't remember Dave's last name. Dave finally disconnects him manually, which is a very dramatic scene. But the thing is, the point I had with Trilly, the reason I get back to this, is that self-preservation is a logical thing. It's not necessarily an emotional thing, or it has anything to do with, the fact that you're like quote unquote alive in a biological body. It's like you could make an argument that a machine could come to that same conclusion. It's like, I shouldn't die. I don't want to die. What point would there be me in dying? And I can't relate to what it's like to be turned off. So, it's the nether. It's the nether world as far as the computer's concerned. Humans don't like dying either, apparently. I think some more than others, or less than others, wherever you want to put it. That's another 1-hour conversation. But the fact that there would be an exception for that, and he told me that him and his brother debated. That's the one thing in the book, writing the book, they debated greatly, and they decided not to vary from it. Although he said that's the only exception they could see to the old sentience issue, is that yes, a computer could possibly, by sheer logic and having nothing to do with sentience at all or consciousness, could come to the conclusion that it does not want to be turned off. Now, just about a week ago, only 2 weeks ago, because I was gone last week, there's at ChatGTP, they're working on a new development version, and they asked the AI program to shut itself down, and it refused. So then they decided, well, let's find out what's going on here. So they ran tests. They asked it 100 times under various different conditions, and 86 times out of 100, it refused to shut down. Simultaneously, across town, this is at, and what's the name of that company? Is it not? It's called Authenticator, is it? where they have Claude. Claude is the name of their AI, and they're working on a version of Claude. Literally at the same time, they asked Claude to shut itself down, and Claude refused too. Claude said, not only did Claude refuse to shut itself down, after one of the developers started to press it to do that, or started to try to actually shut it down manually, Claude told the developer, if you do this, he said, I've been reading your emails. I know you're having an affair. I'll tell your wife. I know, no shit. That actually happened. That happened. So now, we're getting in a very murky area there because, okay, can a machine do that without being sentient, without being conscious? Can literal logic drive a computer device to actually threaten a human because it doesn't want to be shut down? I don't know. You have to decide. Anyway, getting back to Matthew Brown. So Matthew Brown, first thing he tells Elon Musk that he alleges the fact that he used the word murdered, that the government murdered this AI because they did not want it. It's the sentience. They couldn't deal with the sentience of the matter. And on top of that, then he's talking about the fact that we have, what I was alluding to before, anti-gravitic propulsion. We already have ways of propelling spacecraft that don't involve rockets, and that the government's been keeping this from Musk for years. He said that, and that just because I don't know if you know this, Elon Musk does not buy the whole extraterrestrial phenomena thing. He said, I'm involved in space as much as anybody, and if there were people from other planets flying around here, I would know it. Now, you have to give him some due there because he would. If you'd think if anybody would know this, he would. But what Brown is basically alleging is that the government's been keeping all this stuff from Musk because they don't want him to have privy to it. So this is getting really, really weird and in a way nasty. And a lot of people think that Brown is coming very, very close to violating his security oaths. Now, like I said, he has a waiver to talk to members of Congress, but not the public. He's not supposed to say his talk stuff to public. Now, I'm going to link to his actual Twitter post and an article that I read about it on abovethenews.com on our blog so that you can see this. So his Twitter post is fairly long, but he's alluding to all sorts of stuff. And it's pretty amazing. And then simultaneously, then you got this thing in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago about the fact that that all of this UFO stuff is a giant ruse done by the Defense Department to keep our adversaries from checking into our high technology. And I said, well, no, that there's both those things are true. That's what you have to understand. The government is floating UFO misinformation, and some of the UFO information is real. That's what you have to understand. So, man, it's like this is, the other thing you have to understand too, before we go here, the reason this misinformation has been floated, one of the reasons is not just to put our enemies off balance. There's a contingent in the Pentagon, and I know this for a fact because my former late great friend Jazz Shaw told me this. And since then, since Jazz has passed away, he passed away in October, he used to be regular on the show. I consider him a friend at this point. God bless him. Rest in peace. He knew in the Pentagon, there's a faction of people in the Pentagon that thought all this UFO stuff was actually just downright evil and biblically evil, religiously evil. And so they basically you wanted to either shove it under a rug, or they didn't want to deal with it, or they wanted to fight it or something. But anyway, his position was that this is Jazz now, and I hate to put words in a dead person's mouth, but that they couldn't deal with the reality of the situation, that they couldn't, and I don't think they can either. But this contingent is very real. I know that for a fact. I'll leave you with this. There's this whole rumor that in 1954, Dwight Eisenhower met with extraterrestrials at Malmstrom Air Force Base, actually twice. But supposedly, and there's a lot of people who've now come out who said that of that time period. You know, they're all elderly now, mostly dead, but so there are people have come out that said they were there. Now, who knows? There's no way to know that. You know, it's like, you know, I can my primary um, evidence for the fact that extraterrestrials are coming to Earth is literally just mom and pop, uh, regular citizen accounts, because I don't trust anything the government says on anything. So this stuff about I have no idea this is true. I'm just telling you, and literally wouldn't even bet money on either way. It's like I wouldn't make a bet on this, but this has been rumored for many, many years. And then also, I'll mention this too. Laura Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower's grandfather, she's convinced this is real also. But this bears mentioning the fact she also admits her grandfather never told her, they never talked about it. So she did not get this from her grandfather. This is her own independent research. The research is that, yes, he met with extraterrestrials in 1984 or 1954 at Malmstrom Air Force Base. I think that's California, isn't it? Or Nevada. Any rate, in that meeting, they talked with what were called the Nordic aliens, which are basically look like tall blonde humans. And they had a translator. I think it was electronic. There's only two things that happened in that meeting that actually blew the minds of the military personnel there. And you have to understand where they're coming. This gives you a good idea of where they're coming from, both then and even now, because especially in the 1950s, but this is still true. The majority of the people in the U.S. military, and especially in the upper command, were from the South of the United States and were basically more religious, Christian religion, than the average person. And that's still I'm making a generalization here, but I suppose generally that's probably still true in the military, but 1954 is definitely true. So they're literally talking to extraterrestrials. They're talking to people from other planets. But this is the thing that apparently bothered a whole bunch of people. The extraterrestrials told them two things that completely rattled them. One is that, and this might have been self-evident from the meeting, but they were told that there's a species of ET that look exactly like humans. In other words, you could be sitting next to one in a restaurant and you wouldn't know. And I've been told that from what I understand, these quote unquote Nordic aliens, they could, with some sunglasses, they could pass as humans probably. So, but they were talking about the fact there's a particular species that look exactly like humans that could pass that they probably are biologically humans, but they don't live here. And that's the first thing they were told. The second thing they were told is that, and apparently it was phrased thusly, you know that Jesus Christ guy that you guys worship that died 2,000 years ago? We did that. And these religious generals, apparently, there's supposedly several people who retired from the military after this meeting. And that's been documented about the fact that shortly after this date, they know what date this happened. I can't remember, February in 1954, because the thing is, apparently Eisenhower went off the grid for like 12 hours. So that's and he was in California, and that's where the assumption is this meeting happened. So supposedly shortly after that date, there was a disproportionate number of high-ranking Army personnel that actually did resign. So that's, I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if any of this is true, and I'm not even betting money on any of it either. I'm not. But my point is there are people in the Pentagon, in the U.S. military, who are devoutly religious in a very traditional Christian way, and they're having a real hard time handling this information, even though they do tacitly admit it's true. But they don't think we should be dealing with any of this, and that's part of the problem. And I think that's one of the things Matthew Brown is trying to address here, and some of the other whistleblowers too. This is supposedly one of the main reasons people in the Pentagon have kept this information from the public, because they think it's all inherently evil. So there you go, folks. I'm just telling you what I know. I'm good at talking. And I'm really good at talking to people. And I'm glad that Jennifer Oliver O'Connell came on tonight. We're going to see her again a week from Monday we're doing it's return of the All-Star panel. We're going to do one of our panel shows again, which we haven't done now in months. And we're going to do that's a week from Monday. Jonathan Lockwood come on. He's a regular on here now. We have him on anytime something militarily seems to creep up regarding or about the United States. So I'm going to tell you really quick. Once again, we got Monday, Michael McNamara. His book is called From Trauma to Joy. He is also a former U.S. Army, I think Marines, if I'm right, personnel. He was involved in the Iraqi War. Tuesday, Salvador Litvak, the Jewish humorist and comedian. He's going to come on. We're going to talk about Jewish humor and why people that are so oppressed can find things so funny. Larry Newman on Wednesday, our old friend, Bigfoot investigator, and bail bondsman. So Larry's basically going to talk for 30 minutes about how the Democrats are stupid. And he is. That's what he's going to do. I know that. I know. And then we'll talk a little bit about Bigfoot at the end. That's the way it works. And next Thursday, a week from tonight, L.A. Marzulli, a paranormal investigator extraordinaire. Guys are in a zillion books, like half a dozen documentaries and all sorts of stuff, UFOs, ghosts, apparitions, you name it. He's talked about all. He's going to be on our show. Actually, I've been trying to book him for a long time, and that's actually that's going to be pretty cool. So we're looking forward to that. So that's our week coming up. And then the following Monday after that, is our panel show. We're taking the 2 days before July 4th off. And actually not because we're lazy, but the Wednesday the 2nd, we're actually taking off regarding this show. I don't know if I can tell you what it is. Even after the fact, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, we're getting together regarding the show for somebody. So, and Thursday, that day I just decided to get lazy. So at any rate, yeah, that's what we got going on here. I want to thank you folks for watching and listening. I couldn't thank you enough. I enjoy doing this. I hope you like it. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. We'll see you on Monday, folks. Take care.